Hi everyone, this is Professor Benjamin, and we are moving into the last couple weeks of this course. Um, I hope you're excited. After Thanksgiving, it's almost like over the class. So you just have to stay strong for a couple more weeks, um, and then we'll be finished for the semester. So, a couple things. Number one, you had your artwork drafts due last night by 11:59. I'll provide feedback by the end of the week. A lot of you, I started grading some of them. A lot of them look really great. So at least that portion of the project is done. And so that's a good thing. So last week we did population. The week before that we did urban ecosystems. And the one thing that I want to briefly talk about with urban ecosystems for your final exam are the consequences of urban sprawl, which is one big question. And the fact is that once we created the suburbs, we, number one, increased our consumption because a lot of people moved to houses instead of little row homes. They moved to more expensive houses, which meant more stuff. The other thing is that there was a really cool study I just saw it the other day published about obesity and urban sprawl, which is the fact that people gain more weight living in the suburbs because they tend to do less walking. The other thing is, of course, increase in driving cars, so there's more pollution and more traffic. Strip malls were created that are now abandoned because a lot of people decided to move back to the cities, so there's a lot of issues with urban sprawl. And that is one of the issues with the urban ecosystems session. A couple green things that we talked about were like the greenways. So in your textbook, they talked about greenways. And greenways are those areas that are going to connect places like parks. For example, the aqueduct that is supposed to happen underneath, if you've ever been to CCP's main campus, there is that underground sort of area right in between the CBI building and the parking garage. There's kind of like an underground sort of area there, and that actually hopefully potentially will be a park one day. So it used to be an old rail line, and that brought actually paper to the Philadelphia Inquirer building, and what they're going to do is create a park system there. So it'll actually stretch for a couple miles and it'll be all park. How awesome is that? So that's kind of a greenway, or greenway paths, meaning bike paths or walkway paths that connect the entire city together. So there are issues with urban ecosystems that you might potentially see on the final exam. So last week we covered population. A lot of you did a really good job. One thing I just want to remind folks is that even though we're moving into the end of the semester, I do ask that you follow the rules and requirements for initial and response posts. This means in-text citations, paragraph use, proper MLA citation of your source at the end of your post. So even though we're moving into the end of the semester, let's not get lazy. Let's just increase our capacity for writing formal posts that are factually based with those facts backing up our opinions. No I statements, okay, so things of that nature. So just stay on task. I know we're moving towards the end, but just finish strong with the class. The other quick thing before I start talking about population is that don't forget that if you look here, we're going to cover water next week, and then the following week non-renewable resources, and that week requires you to watch Netflix on Netflix to watch Gasland. So Netflix has it watch instantly. You can, there's a bunch of other outlets that have Gasland. I'm sure you can get it somewhere on YouTube. So make sure you've watched the film Gasland to answer the questions that deal with non-renewable energy. It deals with natural gas extraction. So real quick, let me go back to population. So a lot of you did a great job answering the questions. We just fell off on the requirements a little bit. So the One China child policy, there are a lot of social consequences, sex ratio imbalance, the trafficking of women now, the fact that there's so many girls in orphanages is an issue. Remember, culturally, boys are just more acceptable than females because they are actually the social security system for the family. So when the son gets older, he actually takes the parents in and they take care of both sets of parents. So that is actually considered a social security system. So as a culture, males are preferred over females, which led to, when they enacted this policy, was that you could have more than one child, but you're taxed pretty heavily. And what happened was is that if you're taxed and you can't afford it, the one baby that you want to have is a boy, because in China that was just more acceptable. So it led to lots of girls being aborted, lots of girls being abandoned. And now we're finding girls were hidden in villages, and now they have no paperwork to say that they're even a citizen in China. The economic issues are huge because China wants to be this, is a big powerhouse, but also wants to increase its economic prosperities, but they need more people in the workforce, and there's not enough people in the workforce because they alienated a whole part of their population, which was the female population. So there's lots of issues with that. One of the other questions that you potentially may see on your final exam deals with zero to negative population growth in the United States. The baby boomer generation, which is in their 70s and 80s now, will die off at some point, and they were our biggest explosion of population due to World War II. So a lot of people, when they returned home, had babies, and that is what is that. And so now what's happening is that population, which really fed into our social security system, is dying or will be dying, but there's just not enough people to replace them. So the younger generations after them didn't have as many children. And there are a lot of reasons for this. Number one is a lot of women went back to the education system and became educated, so they put off having children. A lot of women entered the workforce, especially during World War II and then after World War II, so they put off having children. The cost of childcare in the United States is really, really high compared to other countries, and so a lot of people can't afford to have more than one child or more than two children. Also, even though we still have limitations on contraceptive use, we do have access to contraceptive more than any other country. So that's one of the, not more than any other country, but we do socially acceptable use of contraceptives in the United States. So that is, these are all components that add to that zero to negative population growth in the United States. So these are some of the questions. Of course, resource use, a lot of you touched on resource use, that's going to be the biggest problem when we exceed our carrying capacity, because then the population will have a dieback, and that is very true. So water, access to food, access to land, any natural resource that we have available. You'll see right here, I put up your review for your final exam. So just like your midterm, you have a review sheet for your final exam. So start preparing now. I actually give you a whole week to prepare for your final exam at the end of the semester before I launch the final exam. So that is also time that you can prepare for your final exam. I think there's 15 questions on there that'll be on the final exam. Next week we'll cover water, and then the following week we'll cover non-renewable resources and renewable resources. And then you'll see your final paper and artwork are due, and then you have a week to prepare for your final exam before your final exam is actually due. So you have just a couple more weeks left, so if you could stay strong for a couple more weeks, this semester will move quickly to the end. If you did really well on your artwork, then that portion of your final project is finished. All you would do is re-upload it if I give you 15 points, and I don't write any comments. So don't just look for the 15 points. Make sure I haven't written any comments that I want you to fix for your final submittal. So if you do really well on your artwork draft, then really that portion of your final project is already finished. So that's why I do it in those drafts, or parts, I guess I would say. Okay, so if you have any questions, feel free to reach out. This week, when we deal with water, actually, so this week we're dealing with water. I completely apologize. So actually, what am I doing here? Yes, so this week we're dealing with water. I completely apologize. I am all over the place this week. We're going to deal with water, so a lot of the questions are going to deal with freshwater use and saltwater use, and also talking about what we're going to do, like California using water for agriculture. Is that okay, or should we be using it for more residential use? So the bottled water, of course, the issues with bottled water, I think that'll be a popular question. A lot of people answer that question. And so this week, water, Sorry, next week is non-renewable resources, and that's why I was concerned about Gasland. So make sure you get Gasland. Now, I know next week is Thanksgiving week, and understand that we have a holiday in there. I'm leaving the due dates as the same, and I say this in all my classes. I'm leaving the due dates as the same, but it doesn't mean that you can't submit beforehand because it is a holiday weekend. But I just like to give everybody the same due dates that we have every week. Just get your work in early so you don't have to do work on the holiday days. Okay, so I leave them open for you, but I just ask that you submit your work before the deadlines. I will leave them open, but just, I technically know the college is closed and you technically shouldn't have work due. So I'm just leaving those portals open for more days than just cutting everything to Wednesday next week. Okay, so make sure you get your hands on that Gasland film to watch. Okay, have a wonderful week. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out and look forward to my comments on your artwork drafts.